Leon meets Beatrice and greets her. He bows and apologizes for not providing her a better place to stay. Beatrice bows her head in return and says it is unreasonable for a queen of her status to do so. She also apologizes for her rudeness. Leon tells her not to worry about it, while thinking the queen cannot do anything about her aura. He then informs Beatrice about how the divinity is pressuring the essence of corruption within her and how it wasn't totally removed. Leon explains that balance must be maintained. Beatrice looks at the symbol in her hand and expresses her understanding. With her being Plu's priestess and still having the essence of corruption within her, it's like Beatrice is half divine and half demonic. The two are finally seated, with glasses of wine before them. Leon offers to drink as a farewell to the knights. Beatrice takes her glass and says that this is all she can do. Leon looks at her and asks how she is adjusting. Beatrice honestly answers that she needs more time. She then comments about how the place entirely differs from where she's from. Leon tells her that she doesn't really need to adjust, surprising Beatrice. He then tells her to be determined and fulfill her own laws. Leon reminds her of how a monarch must have his own rule of virtue wherever he may be. Leon then announces that criminals of all worlds must follow the king's path. It's how our king keeps giving off this regal aura. Beatrice smiles, commenting that it is an invader's mindset. Leon smirks, claiming it is different. He speaks of how harming the world, because of desire as an individual's ambition while helping people and teaching them, is the enlightenment of the king of Lionheart. Beatrice doesn't reply and only smiles, thinking that this mindset is necessary to fight demons for a very long time. The queen slightly changes the topic, commenting on how Leon is facing more than demons. Leon agrees to this, saying that he has a divine quest from the gods. The king then offers the Queen of Sparrow Kingdom to join his quest. Beatrice smiles at this. She then speaks of her debt to him and announces her intention to repay him for saving her kingdom. However, there is still one thing. Beatrice mentions the name Quay, the archdemon of pleasure. Her demeanor changes as she asks Leon to teach her how to eliminate such a thing. You definitely asked the right person. Leon smiles at Beatrice's resolve and says he can do anything as long as it is related to getting rid of those parasites. He then mentions how his heart races whenever he eradicates their souls using the divine laws that they fear. Beatrice is a bit shocked, but she still gives a descriptive narration of what their kingdom does to execute demons. She mentions how they keep coming back, no matter how much they end them, so they resorted to traumatizing them at least. Leon actually finds this wise and adds how demons are selfish in nature and tend to prioritize their pain. Leon fires up as he asks Beatrice if she tried something different and exclaims about how it can make the demons scream the loudest. Beatrice's expression changes and she laughs, as she describes something similar to Leon's suggestion. Leon laughs at this, saying that her methods are creative, and Beatrice laughs back in appreciation. The two toasts as they bond on how to make demons suffer. It is still dark outside in the Jeju Plains, and Ho numbers Hari is just entering the gates, wearing comfortable clothes. She notices the presence of his and her majesty, and quickly greets them. Seeing her, Leon tells her to pour them some tea. Hari tries to maintain her smile and grabs a thermos from her bag, completely prepared by the sudden request. She asks for the queen's preference, and Beatrice responds that she likes anything warm. Holding his paper cup, Leon announces that Hari should work for Queen Beatrice. He then reminds her to dress and act accordingly before the queen. Yet another task for Hari to do. Beatrice is a bit taken aback and says it is unnecessary. Hari makes a face as she tries to hold her tongue. Leon disagrees with Beatrice, claiming that royalty requires appropriate treatment and servants. Beatrice then addresses Hari and comments on her fiery energy. She asks Hari's permission to look at it. Hari is surprised that the queen recognizes her exclusive skill. Leon understands Beatrice's interest and tells Hari to swing her sword. He states that Hari deserves a reward for working under him all this time. Leon once again tells her to show her sword technique and he'll also look at it. The Night King takes out a sword, while Hari expresses her appreciation. Leon hands Hari the sword, and Hari soon gets into position. She unleashes fire and strikes her sword with a wide slash. Seeing this attack display, Leon immediately comments on how big her attack is. His Majesty asks if Hari does it to use her skill. Hari hands the sword back and confirms Leon's suspicions. Leon takes a stance and explains how using a sword means she should be powerful, while making a short move. The Night King then demonstrates how it is done. With a short straight strike, Leon unleashes great energy that destroys the ground, making a noticeable path of his action's strength. Our king is finally teaching Hari, but his slight movement still feels OP. Hari is so surprised by what happened. Unlike her, Leon simply gives her an easy task, telling Hari to practice it 10,000 times a day. Hari makes an expression of surprise and hesitance at the sudden daily task. Her work is really piling up now. Leon asks for Beatrice's opinion, and the queen mentions Hari's lack of controlling fire. She then stands up and explains how fire can easily dissipate. The queen takes a sword from her own subspace and explains that instead of doing what Hari just did, she should concentrate the flames. Beatrice shows Hari how it is done and explains how a concentrated flame won't be wasted. She then demonstrates how the fire is concentrated on the sword, while swinging and adds that Hari can release the concentrated flames. Beatrice speaks of how this should be done when dealing a deadly blow and presents how doing it with a stab works. The queen releases the fire energy with a stab, quickly turning it into a ray of energy that makes a fantastic finishing move. Hari is totally surprised by what she just saw. Beatrice gives Hari a bright smile and tells her that she should easily concentrate the fire enough to provide that kind of heat. Hari is stunned speechless, thinking that this is not easy for her at all. Their definition of easy is the average person's definition of difficult. That same night, Hari is in front of her laptop, entirely dejected by the amount of her work. She speaks out about all the tasks she still has to do, like giving a report, getting potatoes, and sweet potatoes for the new soldiers in training, getting new weapons and equipment, and finding a blacksmith for such a task. Hari suddenly laments the fact that there's also the issue of handling taxes, and how the academy never taught her about such things. Poor Hari, a high-rank hunter who's stuck doing various tasks out of her job scope. Yappy suddenly appears, scaring Hari into shock. The Grail Knight asks about the accounting work and suggests creating a division of accounting work. Hearing this, Hari suddenly recalls how Sir Yappy is a supercomputer and imagines how easy this task is for the knight. She then starts explaining things to Yappy. The Grail suddenly goes on about referring to the big data and lists off the stuff that needs to be considered. Hearing the sudden long list makes Hari sweat and feel defeated. Her head poofs, not understanding a single thing that Yappy mentioned, while claiming how helpful it was. Yappy thinks he helped somehow and reminds her to report in case of more trouble. Nope, you just gave her a headache, Yappy. Hari then recalls something and speaks of how she needs some clothes for when she's working as a servant, like a maid's uniform. Yappy mentions how the Lionheart Kingdom is akin to middle-aged European kingdoms and concludes that a maid uniform being a servant's clothing is a reasonable theory. Hari gets excited, seeing that Sir Yappy understands her. She confides how she is scared of getting scolded if it looks like cosplay. Yappy, feeling like he could help, offers to order the maid uniform for her based on the big data. Hari confirms, feeling grateful for Sir Yappy's help. However, Hari has no idea that the big data that Sir Yappy is referring to is actually compiled data he got online. So in this case, Sir Yappy purchased the most popular item, considering the 5-star reviews. This just shows the evil effect of the big data. I can already imagine what kind of disaster will befall Hari. It is another new day, and a bus arrives carrying our new characters. Hansuo, an A-class hunter from the academy, gets out of the bus. He is followed by another A-class hunter named Kim Jae-hyuk, who comments on how there are more of them than he expected. Sudo smiles back at Jae-hyuk, saying this is only to be expected. Let's do a flashback of when Leon visited the Hunter Academy. Leon announces that he is looking for seedlings of knights instead of soldiers. He tells the academy students how he will be teaching them swordsmanship, spearmanship, horse riding, and theology. The last part surprised a lot of the students. A student bravely speaks of how they specialize in archery, which gains Leon's irk. The Night King quickly fails the student who just spoke, saying his attitude is more of a soldier's. The student sits back, commenting on His Majesty's harsh treatment. Initially, the students have their complaints about Leon's attitude, but this changes. Leon explains how studying theology also means that they get to learn of simple divine laws. To explain further, Leon shows them his golden aura of divinity. With a few movements and poses, he shows them a glowing orb of divine power. This catches the students' awe, and they are immediately convinced by Leon's display of OP. We all love OP characters. That's why we're all here. Recalling that previous scene, Jae-hyuk says is a complete shock, while Suo mentions how it lets anyone use magic. A black-haired girl, getting out of the bus, joins their conversation and says it is not magic. Chiyan So-yeon, another A-class hunter, says what they sought isn't magic. Jae-hyuk smirks at So-yeon's attendance and how she previously got called a peasant by His Majesty. So-yeon suddenly blushes upon recalling this as well. Sumo then asks her about her choice, when she happens to be the granddaughter of the Divine Sword Guild's guildmaster. So-yeon raises her phone and shows them her reason for joining. Jae-hyuk and Suho look at her phone, which has the Pantheon TV channel on. So-yeon says that the channel has videos regarding divine laws and fluctuating gates. Sumo checks it on his phone and notices that Hari is also in some videos. Oh, Sumo is related to Hari. Jae-hyuk comments on how Suho has a lot of money, yet he's still using an old phone. Suho replies that he has already donated most of it to the orphanage. Jae-hyuk looks at the video where Hari is and comments on how these siblings are both working hard. He then recalls how Hari is also currently dispatched to Pantheon. Jae-hyuk smiles and confirms, thinking of how his Nuna is undoubtedly doing a great job at that moment. However, things are not actually going Hari's way. Hari is now wearing a sexy maid uniform, utterly distraught by her current situation. She asks Sir Yappy if he is sure about this, and the Grail Knight confirms. He mentions how the numbers from the big data do not lie. Hari is complaining about how short the uniform is, but Yappy is adamant that the data he got is correct. Aha, you're complaining that you still wore it. The two are just behind the headquarters gate, where the academy students just arrived. Suho recognizes his Nuna's workplace and wants to surprise her. He doesn't hesitate to knock on the gate, making Hari startled by the sudden presence on the other side. Only then does she recall how guests are arriving that day, and Yappy offers to greet them since she is busy. Hari shouts, trying to stop Sir Yappy, but Yappy is undeterred and shoots a string to open the gate. Hari continues to shout to stop him, yet the gate door is now open, revealing Suho with a huge smile. Hari is entirely red, seeing Suho as she tries to cover herself. Really, where are your other clothes, Hari? Sumo is speechless at the sight of his Numa in such a dress. Though on the brink of tears, Hari tries to salvage the situation by greeting the guests. Snapping out of shock, Sumo hinders Jae-hyuk's sight and asks what his Numa is even wearing. Hari tries to defend herself, saying that she wore it, not because she wanted to. Hearing this, Yappy again asks if she is questioning his big data. Suddenly, Leon appears, asking what Hari is wearing. Hari continues to blush as she squeezes Yappy and looks back at His Majesty. Leon is completely aghast by such display and scolds her. He shouts for her to immediately get changed. Hari can't really complain and can only accept her fate. Hari angrily looks at Yappy in shame, making the robot finally realize that he actually made a mistake. Yappy suddenly announces that it is the second-term trainee food time, as if only recalling that salt water must be given. The Grail Knight suddenly makes his escape, leaving Hari on her own to get scolded some more for his own mistake. Suno can only watch as his Nuna gets scolded, ruining the reunion with his respected sister. In another part of the country, a red gate has appeared on Jeju Island. The Huang siblings are in the vicinity, and Yeon-ha mentions her brother's greed as the reason why they are there. Cheol, in his defense, reminds her of their guild's financial situation due to what happened with the Cheonju Gate. He's referring to the gate where Yappy is from. Cheol claims that they must make up for it. In this case, he brought 40 others from the Golden Lion Guild. Someone approaches the siblings and greets Cheol. The pair looks in surprise at the appearance of the other. Cheol smirks as he mocks the other for disappearing after the incident that involved the government and asks if he was also chosen for that mission. Yeonwon glares at Cheol and mocks the other regarding the guild incident that happened in Cheonju. This irks Cheol, who angrily laughs while looking down at Yeonwon. The Phoenix Guild's guildmaster does the same, except he's looking up. Cheol then asks if the payment for them will be split equally. Yeonwon calls him out for such BS and says that he won't even be doing as much. Hearing this, Cheol mocks Yeonwon some more, calling him an outright traitor that others wouldn't really help. This angers Yeonwon, and he reminds Cheol not to cross the line. For some guys who intend to team up, they're really going at each other's throats. Suddenly, Yeonwon says that the sharing is 6-4. Cheol readily agrees to this and asks Yeonwon to treat them to a meal. Yeonwon shoots back, saying they should buy their own meal while pointing at Cheol. Yeonha sighs as she watches the two, feeling like she is with a pair of kids instead of two grown men. Someone suddenly appears behind Yeon-ha, agreeing with her sentiments. Yeon-ha curses in surprise and tells the other to make some noise when walking. Ha-yuri, an S-class of the Phoenix Guild, smiles at Yeon-ha, telling her to talk more nicely. Yuri points out how they've all gathered there before a dungeon break occurs. She adds that the team comprises 3 S-rankers, and one who is almost an S-rank. Considering this, Yuri believes that this is enough to ensure the clearance of a lower black S-rank gate. However, such overwhelming confidence can be their downfall. Inside the gate, Yeon-won sweats in worry. Numerous people are lying lifeless on the ground. He and the other hunters remain vigilant. Someone in complete armor is furious at their attempt to save those insects. The one in full armor calls himself Geovrick, a grail knight of the Lionheart. Wait, is the gate a part of our king's world? Just how do these gates really work? Geovrick is filled with a green aura as he announces his intentions to hand out divine punishment to them. The system appears before the hunters, announcing that the quest is to save those in peril, and the clear condition of the raid is to defeat the magnificent Geovrick. Gidam Chiol and the others look at Geovrick in surprise and confusion. Geovrick calls them outsiders and asks why they have harmed the royal military. The Grail Knight claims that his Warhammer's actions depend on their answer. Yeon-ha cracks her knuckles, starting to get irritated by the other. Yeon-won takes over, saying that there was a misunderstanding. He talks in an amicable tone, reasoning that they only defended themselves when a knight attacked them. The knight in question retorts at this, calling Yeon-won an inferior mercenary. Geovrick suddenly brings his warhammer to the ground with a large thud, and calls out Delian M-Chain. The Grail Knight warns the other of his impatience that can cause ruin and scolds the other for dirtying the goddess's name with his impulsive actions. Delian looks down and stutters an apology. Geovrick then apologizes to the outsiders on behalf of Delian. Yeon-won continues to act amicable and expresses his gladness in clearing up the misunderstanding. But this guy is Yeon-won, the same person who has a bad habit of looking down on others. Yeon-won thinks it is easy for him to deal with such a thing and expects things to be simple. Geovrick suddenly speaks, surprising Yeon-won and the others. The Grail Knight then talks about how inferior mercenaries have slain 6 soldiers of the kingdom. Deeming that this is a severe sin, Geovrick speaks, as if in deep thought. With 6 of his men gone, he finds that it is only just to take 60 heads for it in return. Are you really related to our king? Back at Naju Plains, Hari is now wearing her usual hunter attire as she walks with the newcomers. Suho and the others are looking around. Jae-hyuk thinks they are just in the countryside, which obviously lacks modern facilities and medical lounges. Well, there's no need for medical lounges when they have the Holy Grail. Jae-hyuk continues to look around, observing how the people only drink water at the cafeteria. Hari announces that they have arrived at their destination, and Suho, who is in front, is shocked at what's before them. Jae-hyuk is initially confused by Suho's expression, but he and the others soon become surprised as well. Hari says that they are now in the soldier training grounds. At that time, the soldiers are all currently training without holding back. Jae-hyuk rubs his eyes in disbelief as he asks Hari what is happening. Hari makes a face as she stutters that it is training. The others can't believe that the mayhem they're seeing is actually training. Hari claims there is a deeper meaning behind that kind of training and was about to speak more of it. She then recalls how His Majesty said that the training manual for knights is different. Her face darkens while she maintains a smile, saying that they are lucky. Right? Lucky them. They'll get to experience what our king went through to become a knight. Looking at Hari, Jae-hyuk can only think of getting out and escaping that place. Suddenly, Leon speaks from behind Jae-hyuk, commenting on their presence. Jae-hyuk stifles his almost shriek at the sudden appearance and quickly moves away. The others are completely shocked, while Hari smiles as she greets His Majesty. Leon gives a non-committal response and announces the presence of students who are thinking of entering his military. He shouts for the soldiers to halt their training and take their seats. In a short while, Hari places a pillow on the training grounds. She asks His Majesty to sit there, while the students are a bit confused. Once seated, Leon tells Hari to stand with the students. Leon reminds her to prepare to become a mission knight and aim for higher. Hearing his consideration, Hari agrees to what His Majesty said. Hari walks to where the students are, and the soldiers smile at her as she passes by. Yep, Hari is up for promotion tilled. With that settled, Leon announces that he intends to take the most talented among them as his disciples. He explains that he will personally teach those who are chosen, and this is an honor. Hari calls Suo's attention with the motion of her hand. She then whispers to him, reminding him not to be rude to his majesty. Hari claims this is because she is extremely worried for him. Suo is only confused by this. Just listen. She's the most experienced when it comes to dealing with our king. With Leon's announcement, his aura becomes deadly as he urges them to show off their skills. He tells them to raise their swords and attack him. The students are surprised and confused by this, while Hari can only cry as she grabs her sword. Leon says the time limit is until the last one falls. He then reminds them of the Holy Grail's existence, stating there is no need to worry about injuries. Leon suddenly appears in the midst of the students and Hari. He smiles as he says that with them being 40, he will be glad if even one of them manages to attack him. Hari quickly shouts for everyone to move, but Leon is already at it. A student is stunned when Leon suddenly comes before him. Leon announces the first one with a flick of his finger, sending the student flying off in a scream of pain and surprise. Yep, merciless. At least you only got a flick on the head. The others are shocked by what just happened. Freddy didn't even see it. With a student knocked out by a simple flick in the forehead, another shouts for them to get their weapons out. Leon smiles at this and tells them to come at him. In that short time, the impact of the flicks and screaming can be heard. Jae-hyuk is already on the ground, groaning at the bump on his head. Sumo is on all fours with his own bump while the others are lying down on the ground, ultimately defeated. With everyone down, Leon observes how everyone still has a long way to go. He mutters how he thought they would be at least on the level of a knight-errant. Suo, Jae-hyuk, and So-hyun somehow recovered. Suo is confused, considering how they didn't even hesitate. Jae-hyuk confirms this, saying he was a bit surprised at first, but still gave his all on attacking. Hari remains on the ground, commenting on how strong his majesty is and describes the experience akin to a boss raid. Hari then recalls how there was no opening at all. Here's a short flashback of what happened. Sumo and Jae-hyuk are attacking from different sides simultaneously, while Leon remains standing in the middle. Suo makes the first strike. However, Leon easily grabs Suho's sword while misdirecting Jae-hyuk's attack with his other hand at the same time. The Night King then proceeds to smash them both to the ground. While Leon is busy with them, Hari appears from behind, intending to catch Leon off guard. Determined, Hari gives her all in striking, creating a huge explosion with her fire. In spite of that, Leon remains unscathed and is instead grabbing Hari's sword with a menacing smile on his face. Hari is unable to take her sword back, but So-hyun chooses to take advantage of this moment to strike Leon in the back. So-hyun is about to attack, but Leon only looks back at her with a smile, saying it's not bad. And that's the end of the flashback. Seeing that the students are fine, Leon proceeds with his previous explanation. He tells them the method is simple with soldiers, since they only endlessly push the body. However, the same thing can't be said for a knight. The Night King says the first group that was able to endure until the end must reach the Kingdom Knight's level, while the others must improve by at least a level. So-hyun raises her hand and asks His Majesty's standards. With a reasonable question, Leon explains how his kingdom categorizes knights into 5 levels. The first level is the Knight-errant, who is still waiting to be appointed. Next is the Kingdom Knight, who proves themselves and finally gets appointed. The third is the War Knight, who commands those knights. And the next one is the Mission Knight. Oh, it's the category that Leon wants Hari to prepare for. Suho asks about the Mission Knights. Leon explains that they are those who leave everything behind and wander around in search of God's quest. He adds how one must be prepared to wander around for decades to undergo such a thing. Leon smiles, recalling his journey to receive and accomplish the quest from Goddess Ariana. He then tells them that this is how he became a Grail Knight. Suo raises a hand and asks if the Grail Knight is the highest level. Leon confirms this and chooses to explain further. He says that a Grail Guardian is a title bestowed to a single Grail Knight, who succeeded as the King of Lionheart. Leon adds that intending to obtain that title means challenging his kingship. He then gives everyone a grim reminder that such a challenger will be immediately slayed, seeing how powerful you are. No one would even dare. The warning makes everyone sweat, and Jae-hyuk can't help but make a scared sound at such a proclamation. Leon returns to his calm demeanor and smiles as he says that this is the only time they can challenge him, since his power is currently weakened. He adds that his power is more akin to a Grail Knight's. The students recall how Leon looked as they fought, wondering how he could even be described as someone weaker. Thinking about it, Jae-hyuk asks about the strength of a Grail Knight. Leon ponders this question for a moment and says that a Grail Knight's strength is something hard for them to understand. Back inside the Jeju Island gate, the hunters are on the ground while Geovrick stands in the middle as he releases green energy, with Cheol and the others down. The Grail Knight is about to bring down his warhammer once more. Well, I guess a Grail Knight is stronger than numerous high-rank hunters combined. Yeon-ha wakes up in surprise and groans as she sits up. She curses at her headache and thinks about how she was unconscious and can't recall what happened. A woman suddenly speaks up and enters the room. The woman introduces herself as Hilder, a shaman of the Woodsling tribe. She calls Yeon-ha a hero, confusing the hunter. Hilder smiles at Yeon-ha as she approaches, claiming that she defended them from the kingdom's merciless troops. Cheol then enters and smiles, glad that his sister is still alive. Yeon-ha calls her brother a brat, while Hilder comments on the other hero's return. Cheol looks back, saying that he managed to shake them off. Yeon-ha is still confused by what's happening and asks about it. Cheol asks about the extent of his sister's memory. Yeon-ha recalls the smashed ground and somehow escaping because of Ha Yuri's smoke bomb. Cheol sighs, saying that Yeon-ha lost a whole day's worth of memories, which is only understandable. Why? Is this something common for your sister? Cheol then talks about how the spell failed and how they managed to escape. Cheol claims that pursuing them was hard for the foot soldiers. However, this can't be said the same for the Grail Knight, who Cheol describes as a crazy monster. Geovrick determinedly chased them, and it was around this time that the Woodsling tribe aided them. Cheol then informs Yeon-ha how she got hit by a hammer while fighting. Recalling this makes Yeon-ha's hair rise. Oh, so that's why she lost a bit of her memory. Cheol says his sister should be grateful, since she almost met her maker, and they only managed to prevent this with the shaman's help. Hearing such news, Yeon-ha asks about their healers. Cheol explains how the healers can't recover for some reason, only confusing Yeon-ha more. Hilder joins the conversation, describing how Geovrick can curse others by preventing them from healing. What? Does a Grail Knight really have such an ability? Hilder adds how Geovrick uses his ability to recover and regenerate, opposite of what it is intended for. The shaman holds Yeon-ha's shoulder, making the hunter notice some markings on her back. She looks back in surprise and asks what those are. Hilder explains that it is an imprinted spell, meant for recovery. It is a unique skill of the people from the tribe, and each marking carries a different effect. Hearing this explanation, Yeon-ha lets it go, and even calls it cool. Cheol then asks if his sister can stand up now, since they will have a meeting. A little later, the hunters are in a hut with some Woodsling tribe people. The tribal chief Beldy is among them, explaining how the kingdom's army has branded them heretics. If it is the Lionheart Kingdom, there's probably a good reason they did it. Beldy shares a graphic description of what they had to suffer under the hands of their adversary, and how their tribe retaliated. However, 3 of their tribes still perished. They reached the point of asking the gods for help, which is how the heroes appeared, as an answer to their call. Yeon-won silently contemplates Beldy's words, while Cheol comments on how strong the enemy is. Yuri mentions how they have 3 S-class hunters and 150 others on their raid team. Hilder speaks up, letting them know that Geovrick's armor can withstand a giant bull's charge, on top of having regenerative power that can heal even burned flesh. She adds that his whole army has the same benefits. As long as Geovrick stands, she must be referring to the buffs a Grail Knight receives, and how this is automatically shared with friendly forces. Yeon-won recalls this and comments on how Yeon-ha's vambrace is the only item that worked against the knight. Yeon-ha confirms this, saying it is meant for penetrating armor. She thinks they should have more armor-piercing items. Hilder looks at her and asks about it. Yeon-ha explains that it is the kind of item that can ignore defense. Hearing this, Hilder smiles and suggests their tribe's marking that has the same effect. A system appears, notifying of Mazer's molar marking, which can increase armor penetration up to 35% and have an additional 20% increase in endurance and strength. Yeon-won looks at the marking in his hand in amazement, saying they now have a chance when faced with the enemy. That kind of buff is nothing, compared to the long list of buff our king shares with his people. Beldy nods at this, commenting on how the preparations are done. He calls the hunters heroes and asks them to save them. Beldy adds that they are willing to do anything if they can aid them. We're now moving to June Ranch on Jeju Island, A horse neighs, making someone exclaim upon seeing a real horse. The academy students just finished their basic tests and training, so Leon brought them to a horse ranch located on Jeju Island. Everyone is looking at the horses from the other side of the fence, and Jae-hyuk exclaims that this is the first time he has seen one. Someone approaches their group and calls Leon's attention. Leon smiles, saying decent horses are there, and expresses his appreciation for accommodating them, despite the short notice. He then says that he is there for a war horse. The man who approached Leon says that is an honor for him. He starts boasting that their breeding stock is the cream of the crop, including racehorse descent. Leon continues to smile. He says that a horse is only as good as its sire and intends to have a look. It's incredible how our king can be sarcastic and polite simultaneously. Leon turns back to the students and makes them listen. He explains how a horse is a lifelong companion for a knight, so they must bond with their horse and learn to move as one. With a smile, he instructs them to approach a horse they like, try to make a connection, and ride. This immediately fills the students with excitement, and they dash toward the horses. Leon looks back at the ranch manager, counting on his support for the day. The man stutters, as he swears to do his best. Another person exclaims at the many horses in that place. Beatrice arrives with Hari on her side. Good job, Hari. You're finally wearing a proper-made uniform. Hari continues to shade Beatrice with the umbrella as the king and queen exchange pleasantries. Leon offers to escort Beatrice, completely ignoring Hari's presence. Some of the horses are grazing at the center of the ranch. Leon, Beatrice, and Hari are walking in the ranch, and the two monarchs can't help, commenting that the place is decently good. Leon then offers the queen a ride. Beatrice readily agrees with a smile and asks for his recommendation. Looking at the horses, Leon points out to a black horse. Beatrice agrees to this choice and starts approaching the horse. Leon looks back at Hari, telling her to pick one as well. Hari looks at the horses, and the white one catches her eyes. She is about to speak of her choice when Leon suddenly tells her to choose the yellow horse because of its muscular and sturdy build. Our king is probably testing her eye for horses, but her choice is poor, so he decides for her instead. Hari looks at the horse and can only agree with His Majesty's decision. Upon closer inspection, Hari deems that it does look adorable. Looking at the horses, Leon suddenly notices something and tells Hari to move, bumping into her. Leon suddenly offers a hand to Beatrice, saying he will assist her. Hari looks at this display, finding it rude of His Majesty to treat her like that. In a short while, Beatrice elegantly rides the horse in a side saddle, with Leon leading it, while those two make a pretty picture. Hari's hair is getting chomped on by the horse that Leon chose for her. At least Hari is making that connection with the horse. Someone suddenly shouts for His Majesty, making them look at the approaching figure. Leon addresses the newcomer, and the other huffs as he takes a break from running. Raising a hand, the man shows an emergency call from the association president. Finally done catching his breath, Jin-soo quickly explains the situation, and Leon instructs the other to connect the call. Jin-soo proceeds, and from the phone, Kang Hee-yuk greets His Majesty. Leon questions the other about the emergency call, and the president asks Leon for his assistance. He explains that there will soon be a dungeon break. Leon coolly replies that he is not responsible for assisting or cleaning up after them. Kang Hee-yuk acknowledges this and says that his reason for calling will interest the king. He then speaks of the goddess of life and fertility, which catches Leon's attention completely. Kang Hee-yuk explains that someone claiming to be the knight of the goddess is the gate's field boss. Oh, they're getting our king involved again. Leon, Beatrice, Hari, and the academy cadets have entered the gate on Jeju Island. Hari is surprised by the scene before her, unbelieving the cruelty displayed. Crows are picking on some of the lifeless beings in the area, and the cadets can't help but feel nauseated by what they're seeing. As Leon looks around, he recalls what happened before entering. Short flashback. Kang Hee-yuk says one of the survivors from the gate is the man before them. He explains that they've already sedated the man, which should only take a while. Leon says there's no need for this, making Beatrice aware of what must be done. Beatrice asks if it is her turn, and Leon confirms. Beatrice lifts her hand, containing the symbol of the divinity of dream and death, and energy gathers in her hand. Leon says it is not hard, and explains that she only needs to create a space in the man's dreams. He is sure of Beatrice's ability, because she is the creator of a world that underwent numerous cycles within a gate, right? Plu mentioned that place being a never-ending dream in Chapter 32. Beatrice concentrates, and soon, there's a burst of purple light. The queen speaks of a knight with a warhammer, who claims to be the knight, blessed by the goddess of life and fertility. Leon is surprised by this information and asks for the knight's name. Beatrice checks and answers that it is Geovrick, who is also called the majestic Geovrick. Going back to the present, Leon continues to look around. Beatrice determines that it has already been some time since the execution grounds were set and asks Leon if he thinks they were hunters. From Leon's observation, it doesn't seem to be the case. He explains that they carried out burning field tactics and then proceeded with the execution. Leon adds that the intention is not to leave a single seed alive on that land. Beatrice looks at Leon, wondering how he is well informed of what happened there. Leon explains that he did the same while slaying orcs. It's probably a grail knight kind of thing. Leon looks back at the others, saying that it has been a long time since they finished there, and announces that they will trail back the traces to find out what exactly is happening in that gate. After some time, their group rides their horses within the gate. Beatrice calls on Leon's attention and mentions how he seems to be in a rush to the point that he didn't even wait for the arrival of Sir Yappy's troops. She asks if something is going on there. Leon realizes his reconsideration and decides to explain. The Night King says how half-baked skills are treacherous, especially with the appearance of a Grail Knight in that gate. Beatrice looks at Leon, asking if he is referring to Sir Geovrick. Leon reveals that the favorite of Demira, the goddess of life and fertility, is actually Sir Geovrick. He explains how the other is a Grail Knight 3 generations before him. Leon adds how Sir Geovrick's martial arts were passed down to his generation. The Night King tells the story of how, 800 years ago, Sir Geovrick ascended to heaven when he went on a journey to hunt a savage tribe. Oh, is our king referring to the Woodsling tribe? Hari listens intently as they travel and imagines how Sir Geovrick ascended. Suho knows what his Nuna is thinking and corrects her. Leon continues the story, saying Sir Geovrick didn't make it to paradise. He explains that a Grail Knight is considered a saint, for he naturally receives God's love. In the case of Sir Geovrick, his soul wasn't accepted. Beatrice is confused as to how that could happen. Did his soul get stuck or something? Leon says that he tracked the holy item's energy. However, he was still unable to find Geovrick or his subordinates. He then shares 3 theories that he has in mind. One is that Sir Geovrick is alive. The next is that the Grail Knight's soul lost his way. Leon's face darkens as he announces that the last theory is that the Grail Knight changed sides. The Night King unleashes a golden aura at the thought of such atrocity. Leon then says that the involvement of a Grail Knight bestowed with extraordinary abilities means that the battle will surpass what mortals know of. With how things currently stand, they must clear that gate to understand what really happened there. After some time, the group soon reaches another execution ground. Seeing this, Hari can't help commenting on how it was set up for everyone to see. Leon looks up at the lifeless beings on the poles and expresses his anger at such things. Clenching his teeth, he announces how those atrocious criminals must be slain. Hari sees His Majesty's reaction and can't help but admire the righteousness he is displaying. Leon then calls everyone's attention and reminds them that they should only follow him, whatever happens. He adds how they should not trust even their own eyes and minds. Is this something like that demon who tried to fool Dae-sung? Leon asks for their confirmation, and everyone readily agrees with him. Hearing their positive response, he tells them to hurry, for it seems that they are close. Right at that moment, mayhem is happening. Knights are slaying people, with markings on their bodies. Seeing this village, Hari calls for His Majesty's attention, pointing out how they attacked the villagers. Leon is completely shocked by what's happening, looking at everything his eyes can see. Suddenly, the Night King curses out loud as he releases a surge of golden energy. Leon immediately heads straight to the village with Stallion. He shouts how friendly forces are in precarious situations and yells for the others to charge. Oh, those guys are dead meat. This reaction gives Hari high hopes for the king. She's actually glad that His Majesty is enraged, thinking that he cannot stomach such a disaster for people. Leon continues to shout out loud as he charges. Seeing the distance, Jae-hyu can't help, commenting on how fast His Majesty is. Hari claims this is natural when His Majesty is enraged and recalls how he was the same when faced with orcs. The thought of orcs makes Hari pause. Seeing that His Majesty is genuinely enraged, she starts doubting herself. In that short period, Leon immediately reaches the battlefield and shouts, surprising those on the battlefield. The Night King directly charges, with his holy spear and stallion to where the tribespeople are. Leon screams the Lionheart battle cry, and the people he passes by get thrown off in various directions. Those poor guys turn into stickmen. Hari shouts for his majesty, unbelieving of what she just saw. Leon goes bonkers and announces his intentions. As for Hari, she can only think how the king is going in the wrong direction. Who knows, it might be the right direction. A big ray of golden light bursts on the battlefield. Hari and the others are surprised by what Leon just did. A man groans in peril, but Leon has no patience, nor empathy for them. Extremely satisfied, he urges Stallion, so that they can head to the next prey. Hari can't believe what she is seeing, and Jeju even wonders if the king is still in his right mind. Hari doesn't understand why the king is siding with the soldiers and intends to stop him. She's about to draw her sword when a purple energy approaches and envelops her. Surprised, Hari looks at the queen with a question. Beatrice tells her to wait and reminds her to trust the king. Since there is always a reason behind his actions, Hari calms down, thinking of the queen's words. Right at that moment, Leon maniacally laughs as he continues his annihilation. He already managed to do 5 in that short time and even proudly waves his spear around. Looking at the way he's acting, it's hard to tell if there really is a meaning to his actions. Horrified, Hari asks if the queen is sure that the king is not just acting as he pleases. Beatrice can only smile, commenting on how the king sometimes gets excited. Aha, like you're no different when faced with demons. Seeing that their leader has no plans to stop, Jae-hyuk hesitantly says they have no choice. So Yeon then reminds them that whatever the case may be, they can't really stop the king. Hari continues to watch, still hesitant. The only reason they didn't really participate in this act, despite seeing the cruelty, isn't because they lack justice. In their minds, those people perishing are fake. To be exact, the NPCs within a gate are made from past memories. The only exception to this is the rare survivors. With that exception, the enemies and NPCs within the gates are nothing but memories of something that happened before. Considering that they are fake, the actions of slaying or executing aren't considered a sin. And at that moment, Leon continues to shout his intention without holding back. Arcane does his utmost for what's before him, even if those are only memories. After some time, the fight finally ends, and the winning side is obviously the soldiers. Leon's group finally meets the soldiers who gathered. They remove their helmets, and soon, all kneel to the ground on one knee and greet Leon, addressing him as a Grail Knight, a living saint. Leon tells them to rise, for they are still on the battlefield. They heed his command, and the one in front introduces himself as Tasca Velik, Lord Vendelik's brother. He adds that he is affiliated with the Lebanon Dawn Knights. Leon recalls that Vendelik is a city by Lanquil. He then asks about being brothers with the Lord. Tasca explains that he is the only one who has his talent as a knight acknowledged. The Night King thinks of it and observes how Tasca has yet to embark on his pilgrimage. Tasca confirms this, saying that he intends to go after that raid. This is getting sad. If they are nothing but memories, then this only means that this guy won't ever get to go on a pilgrimage. Leon expresses his understanding. However, he doesn't recall anyone with Tascada's name. Leon thinks that if the man became a Grail Knight, then they would have met in paradise, but this is not the case. He suspects that Tasca either failed his mission or that he died on that raid. Looking at them, Leon doesn't recognize even a single face. He can only conclude that they have failed in writing down their names in history. With the current situation, Leon decides to introduce himself. He announces his title as the Lord of Dragonia, owner of the Lion Heart, and the Knight of Ariana, the goddess of light and justice. Leon emits a golden aura and energy from within. The knights see this, and Tasca comments that he is indeed enveloped in glorious holy light. Blast them with a golden divine energy, and poof, you can now prove that you are the king of Lionheart. However, Tasca is still skeptical and asks if this is a joke. Leon questions this and asks if a knight would even dare to pretend to be king of Lionheart. Hari and the others only watch, realizing that this group is from a different era, where the king of Lionheart is a different person. Tasca deems Leon's words logical and says that he trusts him. Hari is surprised that the other accepted his majesty's words just like that. It's all right, Hari. It just happens that their ways are complex for the modern mind. Leon addresses all of the knights and asks if they are there to raid barbarians. Tasca confirms this and addresses Leon as his majesty. Leon then asks if the war knight there is the Grail Knight of Life and Fertility, Sir Geovrick. Tasca is a bit confused, but still confirms this. Leon thinks momentarily and announces that he must immediately meet Sir Geovrick. Beatrice looks at Leon with worry in her eyes. Leon asks the knights where the war knight is while thinking how the group there is in charge of dealing with the remnants. Considering their method, Leon forms a conclusion in his mind. One of the knights speaks up, saying Sir Geovrick is on his way to deal with the barbarians. Leon finally understands that it is in that war that the Grail Knight Geovrick experiences a mishap. In short, the setting of the gate therein is something that happened in the past in our king's world. Going to where the tribes are, they have erected their defense, and the hunters are standing at the ready. Chiol smirks as he observes the knight's arrival and how the leader is there as well. Geovrick is riding a winged horse, and his subordinates have gathered below. Yunha looks at them and asks if that gate is really only red, for she feels that the difficulty is actually more like black. Yuri understands her sentiment, but simply says that it is still manageable. She adds that all of the tribes have now gathered, and their current number is at an advantage. More than that, they have the buffs they got from the markings. Yuri thinks of how they can receive the seal, as long as they worship the beast gods that the tribes worship. With their current power, she believes that it is doable. Geovrick looks at how the mercenaries survived and joined the heretics. The Grail Knight considers them inferior. However, he did still let them go as an act of mercy. This time, Geovrick asks why they are there. He's still giving them a chance to not get involved. Yanwon smirks at the question and says they are there to defeat him. He thinks this is only just, considering that the condition for clearing the gate is to defeat Geovrick. The Grail Knight looks down at them and says he'll give them one chance to give up their weapons and leave that place, for they do not carry any great sin. Yanwon frowns at this and claims the other is in no position to speak about sin, when he obviously did something unspeakable. Hearing this infuriates Geovrick. He raises his weapon and announces that there is nothing for him to be ashamed or embarrassed of. Green energy envelops him as he shouts that his actions are justice. The mercenary crosses the line with his accusations, and Geovrick judges that they must receive divine punishment. Hilder stutters as she calls on the warrior. Yanwon tells her to use her defense art, believing that what the knight is doing can't be something used often. Yanwon thinks that blocking it once will be enough. However, his words falter when he sees that the green energy is starting to get bigger. I doubt they can block such an attack unless they have something else under their sleeve. The knights on the ground raise their swords as they release a green aura. The knights have sworn to protect their kingdom and left their future in the hands of the gods. Now, their faith concentrates into one. This scene surprises the hunters. The knights announce their loyalty and provide their power, all in the name of eradicating evil. This oddly feels like a scene from Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon Sun and Moon Ultra Legends. The green energy amassed by Geovrick shines brightly, giving this glory to the real gods. He commands them to kneel and brings down his weapon to unleash the amassed power. It is at this moment the miracle occurred, and with it, the earth fell. Those knights chosen by gods are given the power. It is those knights who have transcended as saints, and this is provided by Ariana, who watches over every knight. The divine energy that Geovrick just released created a massive hole in the earth. The divine punishment is a divine law handled by a knight order, and it depends on the god that the Grail Knight serves. In the case of the Grail Knight of Life and Fertility, the ability destroys the earth. Our king is right. A Grail Knight's strength is hard to understand for earthlings. Yanwon and the other hunters were overwhelmed by this display of power. Chiol is confounded by how that single attack erased 3,000 tribal warriors out of existence. They can only comfort themselves by the fact that it didn't hit them. Looking up at Geovrick, who is still atop his winged horse, the hunters can only wonder if the knight is even human. They are now well aware that they can't win against their foe. This is why you should listen to Geovrick's words. Geovrick grips his weapon and calls on the goddess. He asks for protection and the stability to move forward. As for those who have strayed, Geovrick asks for them to be given the chance to be purified. Glaring at the remaining tribespeople, the Grail Knight announces their end. Yanwon watches as the fight resumes. A command is given to the main dealers to hold back the enemy and face them head-on. The instruction reminds them of their numbers and tells them to surround the enemy. With their horses, the knights dash to their enemies and are soon surrounded by hunters and tribespeople. A knight gets attacked on the side by a hunter. The knight manages to block, and he comments on the strength of the mercenary. The knight asks if this strength comes from the heathen's mark on their body. However, the knight easily retaliates against the hunter's attack, sending him off to destroy a watchtower. Seriously, even if they have some buff, it doesn't mean they can handle a knight on their own. The hunters clearly overlooked something. The knights might not have walked the path toward the quest of gods, but this doesn't change the fact that they were heroes who traveled all over the continent to prove themselves. The knight removes his helmet, commenting on how they must face garbage. The blonde knight yells for the others to dismount and get into their positions. This blonde guy is a kingdom knight of the Knights of Realm. The knights had held their weapons for decades, and a knight that can have pride from his experiences only means that they have already had around 100 years of it. The warriors that slayed green beasts and heathens are also those who stopped the outsiders from their invasion. Their numerous experience against such strong beasts only makes them more formidable. The blonde knight shouts a battle cry, making Yangwon flinch and curse. Yidam Chiol observes the situation, saying how the soldiers from the back are also approaching their way. If they get any closer, he predicts that they'll undoubtedly get destroyed. Yangwon knows this himself. Jiam Chiol then suggests that they should take this chance to run. Yanha can't believe the words coming out of her brother. Jiam Chiol bluntly speaks of how their number can't handle a group of knights or the field boss. Yanwon considers this and says they can gather help from the other top 10 guilds. However, this also means a dungeon break will occur before they can gather forces to help them. Jiam Chiol says there is a way that can help them end things better. Yanwon looks at Jiam Chiol, not understanding what he means. Brah, Hilder is clearly listening. Are you sure you should be planning right before her, even if she's an NPC? Jiam Chiol then speaks of Ariana, the goddess of light and justice, and Demira, the goddess of life and fertility. He then asks Yangwon if he has heard of them. The Phoenix Guild guildmaster says he hasn't, since he's not interested in religion, and he is skeptical as to how religion can be related to the gate. Jiam Chiol asks instead if Yangwon has seen the YT channel of the King of Lionheart. Yangwon's face changes when he is reminded of the survivor. Jiam Chiol shares his thoughts on how that king might be from that gate's kingdom. He supported his suspicions by saying how he felt off when he heard people speak of God's night and whatnot. Yangwon mulls over Jiam Chiol's words. If this is indeed the case, then it would be best for them to retreat instead. Hilder calls to them and asks if they are leaving and abandoning them. Yangwon turns his back on her, saying they will bring back support, and adds that they must retreat for now. As he says this, he thinks of how time is wasted by chatting with an NPC hum. Not always. It is actually an achievement if one interacts with the NPCs in Genshin. Yangwon then gives the command to inform everyone of retreating. Hilder's face darkens once she hears the continuous command to get out of the gate. She suddenly speaks in a cold voice as to how the monsters won't also be defeated this time. Yangwon feels a chill as he hears the shaman talk. Hilder bites her thumb as she talks about how none of their kind has ever managed to clear that gate, and calls them disgusting. She bites her thumb with force, making Yangwon more wary of her. Hilder ignores Yangwon and says she'll have to use an expedient again. The shaman knows that he will be displeased, but makes up her mind about it being their fault. Hilder then snaps her fingers, which creates a red electrifying energy. The kingdom knight notices that something is wrong and looks at the lifeless body with glowing marks on the ground. He immediately shouts to the others that dark magic is being used. The body on the ground spits out with a shout, his eyes coming alive. The living tribe's people rejoice upon receiving the blessing of the great beast. In that short time, the tribe's people change forms into beasts with screeching screams. The mark on the hunters makes them groan in pain. Yangwon asks what Hilder did. The woman smiles, saying it is pointless to resist. Hilder says the marking is new, but it will only take a short time to take effect. As she says this, Yangwon's eyes turn white as he continues to groan. This is why you guys should have been wary of her. Hilder claps her hands, commanding them to slay all of the knights. The hunters are now under her control and can only follow the shaman's words. Hilder shows a large smile as she recalls going to different worlds, but still ending up not eradicating the knights. At that moment, Geovrick is already on the ground, dealing with the tribe's men charging at him. He is shocked when the mind-controlled mercenary attacks him. He manages to block the attack, but still curses at them for taking the heathen's marking. Mind-controlled Jiam Chiol only growls back at him. Geovrick then commands the handling of the markings. Jiam Chiol shouts, and soon, the ground breaks into pieces between them. Yuri and Yi and Ha suddenly appear behind Geovrick, striking him into the air. It doesn't end there, for a flaming arrow goes for his head. Yangwan's attack creates a massive explosion. Honestly, they have better teamwork now that they're under Hilder's control. However, their attacks are not enough and Geovrick is still among the living. The Grail Knight curses, realizing the current situation is terrible for them. He intends to send back the survivors to the kingdom, even at the cost of his life. Geovrick stomps his weapon to the ground, once again emitting green energy. He intends to face all of the mercenaries on his own, and mocks them. A loud battle cry suddenly resounds, and great destruction occurs as someone suddenly drops between Geovrick and the hunters. Geovrick is surprised by the shout, and the newcomer. He asks for the other's identity. Leon just appeared with his holy spear. The Night King looks back at Geovrick as he announces his identity as the King of Lionheart, Leon Dragonia Lionheart. Finally, our king is here. Beatrice is looking down below as she uses the former king's reins that can be used to tame any beast. She looks at Leon, who just dropped into the fight, leaving the reins to her. However, this is within her expectations, based on what she observed of the king. Beatrice fondly looks at Stallion, addressing the horse with an honorable title, and thanks him. Wow, I guess all horses of Grail Knights can have wings then. Yappy might be the only exception. Anyway, let's go back to 5 minutes before this scene. Leon describes them as rats that, no matter how you try to dwindle their number, they still multiply and increase. Their group is currently riding hard. Hari tries to reason how the methods are barbaric. Leon glares back, saying that the kingdom and knights are not stupid. He then explains that the technique was used because of the markings on the body. This indicates their allegiance to the beast god. Just thinking of it makes Leon clench his teeth in distaste. He then speaks of how the marking gives them power, but in return, it slowly destroys their souls. This explanation worries Hari, realizing that they are no different from demons. That explains a lot of things in this story arc, but the clear condition given by the system is still messed up. Leon then warns everyone with him that their human mindset and ideals are useless in that vicious fight. He says that what they need is truth and absolute justice. Back to the present, Beatrice continues to fly with Stallion and announces that she must also do her part, as she sees the flying beasts. The Mage Queen brings up her hand and summons magic circles. Beatrice faces these flying monsters with Stallion and tells them to stay back. Back to the battle on the ground, Geovrick calls out to Leon, using his title. Leon looks back at the Grail Knight, observing how the enemy's markings are working well despite being against Geovrick's attacks. He can only conclude that something might be wrong with the Grail Knight's divine law. Surrounded by enemies, Leon calls Geovrick the Grail Knight of Demira. He reminds him that they must first handle the hurdle before them. Geovrick agrees, but he still has questions. Leon looks at the hunters, under the marking's control, and says they should cut the connection on those idiots. Yep, they're indeed foolish, despite being high-ranking hunters. Decided, Leon opens up his subspace as he announces his identity and intention to lead them to paradise. Geovrick is stunned to see what Leon brings out. He can't believe that the Holy Grail is there. With the Holy Grail and Holy Spear in each hand, Leon announces the great divine law, brilliant light. At his call, blinding light releases from the Holy Grail, filling the immediate space with it. Geovrick is almost speechless by such a display of divinity. Light continuously bursts from the Holy Grail. The knights are all surprised to see their injuries heal, and their missing limbs regenerate. At the same time, the markings on the hunters disappear. Many are now on the ground, and Yeonha mutters about the pain. Woo, good thing the Holy Grail can remove those. It would have left a bad taste if they had to use the other method. The thing that happened there is what a real divine miracle is. Geovrick becomes enlightened by this, only realizing now that this is what he had been oblivious to. Divine power. Demira's voice can be heard as she calls on her lost knight. Geovrick recognizes the voice of his goddess. Demira then tells him to go and help the King of Knights. Hearing the goddess's voice clears all the questions and doubts in Geovrick's heart. He then stands up, releasing bright green energy, and swears to heed her command. Leon looks back at him and smiles as he expresses his appreciation to Sir Geovrick for being able to stand on the same battlefield as him. Geovrick announces his intention to stand beside the guardian of the Holy Grail, and the two stand side by side, emitting the divine aura. Now, they can finally wrap things up. Leon observes the main thing occurring on the enemy's side, seeing that the lifeless beasts are gathered in one area, with one seeming to be a host. Hilder curses, seeing that they are now facing more than a halfling Grail Knight. that already has its soul tied. She then shouts to the great iron bear and offers sacrifice. A loud growl then comes from the huge beast formed and shouts Lionheart. The beast swears to make a mincemeat of Leon, and smaller beasts start dashing toward them. Beatrice suddenly appears, saying that she'll open a path for him. Riding Stallion, Beatrice creates a vast magic circle above her. Purple electric-like energy gathers, and the system notification pops up, announcing the great prophecy. Beatrice uses Death Eye, and from the magic circle, a huge ray of purple light blasts on the beasts. The loud sound of screaming can be heard. From where the monster is, the enemy once more speaks of Lionheart, as if cursing for meeting again. Beatrice effectively eradicates the other beasts, leaving the only giant monster. She's really OP, but still a bit behind, compared to our king. Leon walks, telling his brothers, sisters, knights, and soldiers to listen well. He grabs his holy sword and announces the time to punish the heathens. In a different part of the gate, Hilda runs as fast as she can, trying to escape. She curses out loud at those monstrous beings and Grail Knight. She already has a hard time dealing with Geovrick, so the appearance of the King of Lionheart only gives her more problems. Hilda also recalls how a witch was there. Lol, our king makes it look easy. A voice suddenly calls out to her, asking where she is running to. Hilda is surprised not only by the call, but also by the purple thing trapping her into place. The voice asks if the item she holds is a mana stone, recalling how this is a new source of concentrated mana that can be gained from hunting within a gate. Beatrice appears behind Hilda as she asks her questions. The queen speaks of the weird production rate since it can be easily found. She wonders out loud if this is because numerous monsters were slain. Oh, so that gate serves as some sort of mana stone mine. Hilda remains defiant despite the binding on her. Beatrice recognizes that the gate is in a loop similar to how it was for her. The queen chuckles at how the other isn't a demon, but is acting like she is. Hilda clenches her teeth, realizing something. Beatrice walks closer to the shaman, saying that she has numerous questions. Hilda now understands that her pretense as an NPC was discovered. Beatrice's eyes suddenly turn red as she explains that it is not the kind of power she likes. However, she wouldn't want it to go to waste. The red aura that Beatrice releases starts to envelop Hilda. The shaman realizes that it is actually seduction, but is already too late for her. Hilda slowly calls out to Beatrice, addressing her as master. The queen smiles at this in satisfaction. She's really making good use of the remaining essence of corruption in her. Suddenly, something pops out of nowhere, speaking of how she is disappointing them again. The things that appear ask if Hilda truly no longer recognizes it as her real master. The shaman looks at those, calling them gods. Beatrice sees this and approaches Hilda once more. She then speaks to Hilda's gods, saying how the shaman is now her slave. Beatrice hugs Hilda as she asks what those gods can do now. The gods see this and call out Beatrice for being a corrupted breed of pleasure, promising to give her pain. Suddenly, the sky above them cracks open, making Hilda shout loudly. She describes how the gods will descend, since that gate is the beast god's territory. Hilda speaks in worry, explaining that they might not be in their actual forms, but having the rest of the beast gods descend will only. The rest of Hilda's words falter. Beatrice looks up the cracks with a frown, recognizing that whatever is happening is terrible. These beast gods are really asking for a being. Back to where the others are. Hari and the students are helping the other hunters with their injuries. Geovrick is with Leon, and they speak of the 11th king of Lionheart, who frequently used to talk about Geovrick and other knights. Geovrick is surprised that the current king has met a previous king, and asks about this. Leon explains that he met the 11th king in God's paradise, further surprising the Grail Knight. Hari approaches them and asks Geovrick if he remembers anything. The Grail Knight says he doesn't, and that they are only there to raid the barbarians. Hari looks at Leon with somber eyes, as she calls to him. Still calm, Leon says they should be informed, and instructs her to do so. Looking downcast, Hari starts explaining that Geovrick and the other knights can't leave that gate, because they are all characters restricted within it. She adds that clearing that gate means they have to defeat Sir Geovrick. The Grail Knight suddenly makes a weird sound, making Hari worried for him. Suddenly, Geovrick laughs out loud. He brings his weapon down, with a huge thud to the ground, and dresses Leon. The Grail Knight then boasts to the king that it seems he hasn't lost even once. Leon smiles at this, saying they wouldn't have met if Sir Geovrick had lost. The cracks in the sky increase, and a voice calls out to Lionheart, promising to make a mincemeat out of him. These beast gods really lack imagination. He literally just said the same threat as before. A face and hand appear in between the crack. Leon says that it's started. He then looks back, asking if there's a method to prevent its descent. The person laughs at this. Hildur is wrapped immobile by Beatrice's ability, as she happily claims that there is no way this can be done, since the gate is already done for. She adds how the beast gods will even use their power just to destroy that place. Hearing this, Leon decides to fight, since he can't leave the glorious knights. Beatrice voices her opinion on the matter, saying it isn't wise. Leon says they have no choice, since a dungeon break will occur, if let be. Geovrick looks up and says no. He then claims that there is another method. Leon is surprised by this. Geovrick softly emits a green aura and suddenly attacks himself. The Grail Knight groans, making Hari call out to him. Geovrick remains standing and shows them a mana stone that he took from himself. He reminds them that to close the gate means his fall. Geovrick tells the king to use his power for the living, since fighting in a gate that is about to end is pointless. His words make sense, but I still don't like it. Leon clenches his teeth, unable to say anything about Sir Geovrick's decision. Facing his brothers and sisters, Geovrick announces that the final battle is upon them. He speaks of the king's presence and how they, being dead, will sacrifice themselves for the living. The Grail Knight asks if they are with him. Everyone looks at Geovrick and the knights upon hearing this announcement. The knights do not speak with their mouths, but with their actions. The sounds of groans enter everyone's ears. All of the knights grab the mana stone within them. Leon bows his head, saying that their loyalty is putting him to shame, and speaks of the great task that they have left him. Geovrick looks back at his majesty and asks him for another favor. He asks the king to wait, and Leon assents. Geovrick smiles at this and starts calling out to goddess Demera. He asks her to grant his wish. As the chosen knight of Demera and the loyal knight of the king of Lionheart, he passes his powers through his warhammer. Using the power of the mana stone that Geovrick and the knights hold, green energy gets absorbed into Geovrick's warhammer. The weapon is soon filled with the power of Geovrick. The Grail Knight presents his weapon to the king. He asks his majesty to take it, until someone deserving appears before him. Leon grabs the hammer with one hand, speaking his doubt on the existence of someone who can wield it as well as Geovrick does. Well, whoever inherits Sir Geovrick's weapon is bound to become exceptional. Leon holds Geovrick's hand on the warhammer. The Grail Knight expresses his gladness for the honor and glory of fighting beside the king. Leon accepts his words, promising to remember Sir Geovrick's honor. Leon leaves and Geovrick faces the loyal knights who had faced everything with him. He addresses his cavalry and gives his final order. He commands everyone to protect the king until the last of them falls. Leon clenches his teeth as the knights shout their acceptance of the order. They all shout their blessings to the king. As he leaves, Leon then gives the order to the others to fall back. Geovrick gives a last glance at the king's back and soon faces forward. The Kingdom Knight kneels on his side and hands him a sword. Geovrick raises the sword and announces his name and accomplishments as a knight, a war knight, and the enemies he has slain for the motherland. They really hate those beasts. Geovrick walks between the knights and speaks of how goddess Demera protected them, how goddess Ariana looked after them, and how they brought joy to god Pitos. Long hands appear from the cracks in the sky as Geovrick shouts out loud his title as the all-powerful Knight of Montreal and his identity as Geovrick, the Grail Knight of life and fertility. In front, Geovrick heeds every one of them to go, announcing their death to serve justice. Numerous hands appear through the cracks, and a huge beast is on the land. Geovrick and the other knights face this, as he prays to the gods to look after them. They all take their stances, as Geovrick shouts the Lionheart battle cry. Going to where Leon and the others are, someone calls out his majesty, making him look back. Leon sees that Hari and the others are still there before the portal and tells them to leave. Hari is initially hesitant, but she still speaks of her desire to watch until the end. Leon closes his eyes in thought and gives them permission to stay if they want. Everyone should hear of Sir Geovrick and the other knights' bravery in this fight. Hari stands beside Leon as they watch the clash happening from the distance. Leon keeps hold of the warhammer as they continue to stay there. Hari then calls out to him once more, but Leon says it is not yet time. Leon repeatedly says this. Geovrick had already lost parts of his armor. Leon repeats his words when Geovrick loses the bottom half of his helmet and the Grail Knight shouts as he attacks with the last of his power. A loud shout can be heard, and Jae-hyuk is startled by what he's seeing. and asks what is happening. The huge beast can still be seen as it thrashes around. Someone then says that the beast is hurting. Leon's face darkens in silence as he looks at the stain in the war hammer float. Harvey calls for his majesty. Leon continues to look as the stains dissipate from the war hammer in his hand. He grimly speaks of how Sir Geovrick has ascended. Leon's face fills with anger as he releases golden energy and swears gruesome revenge against the beasts. They'll soon get their karma. Leon starts walking to the portal and announces that they're falling back. The Grail's Knights are known as beings who can forcefully bring results by using divine laws. With the words that the great Grail Guardian said, the question is, will this have any influence? Leon looks back at the battlefield, swearing to remember what happened that day. Leon leads his group, and the Night King's words will only be realized through his actions.